Whenever I step into an open world game, I'm usually looking for multiple paths of progression, different sets of activities, and many ways of approaching the same objectives. While Lost Judgement is a departure from the Yakuza series, the proverbial fruit doesn't really fall far from the tree. It's still quite linear, most mechanics are for specific situations only, and they're very clunky. Now, the strange part is while all these things do grind my gears, I seriously found myself immersed and enjoying this vast, text-heavy, clunky, sometimes on-rails experience. How did I find myself enjoying this title when it sounds like the opposite of what I would like to play? That's the real mystery here, friends, so let's get into it. You take on the role of Takayuki Yagami, a disgraced defense attorney turned into private detective. His latest job sends him to a local high school to handle bullying happening under the noses of faculty. While handling the situation, we quickly find that there is a lot more to learn about what's going on around Ijincho, getting wrapped up into a story about justice, revenge, how easy it is to confuse these two, and the consequences that come with doing that. So make sure to take notes, class. All of this will be on the test. On to the review. First, for the production, or how the game looks and sounds. RGG Studios continues to show how well they can use their very own Dragon engine by creating the same familiar city blocks and the crowded streets with ease. The real impressive part comes during the evening, where they create the glow of street signs and lamps bounce off walls, puddles, and the pavement. They make for a convincing atmosphere along with the chatter that you hear as you pass people by. Though there's some considerable pop-in for crowds when you spawn or if you're moving around that area fast enough. They put in commendable work for detailing the faces of many of the leading cast. They stand out enough and are easy to recognize. Other minor characters and passerby types look passable, but you'll see the drop in texture quality if you look closely enough. Hair looks dated, but they're at least well made. I couldn't help but notice that nearly everyone had their hair set up not to animate, which could look awkward on close-ups or even when people are moving wildly. Music is another thing that I think could have used a bit more work. You see, I generally like to listen to the OST of a game when I'm writing about it, and that's exactly what I'm doing right now. A lot of the time, I feel like I don't remember many of the songs being played. Of course, I recognize the fight music because I hear that so often, but nothing really stuck to me as, yeah, that's definitely a theme from Judgment. I suppose they all succeed in creating a good atmosphere to help contextualize whatever moment I'm playing through, and that's all they really do. There's no unifying theme among all these songs, and that's a shame because they end up being not memorable. Except maybe for the finale, which was epic, and unfortunately the rest was generic. The other side of the audio experience is quite the difference though. It really shows that they got actors to model and play speaking roles for the game. I like the entire cast in general as the voices matched the characters to a T. And I like the English cast as well, except for Yagami. And this isn't to say that he wasn't doing a good job, I just feel like translating the protagonist's personality was a very tall order. I think he did do a good job, but I felt like some of the nuances or subtle emotional shifts in Yagami's character were lost in translation. So while the graphics does feel dated, we can more or less attribute that to the old graphics engine, but it still does a great job of keeping the game consistently performing well. As for the voice, I'd recommend to keep it in Japanese unless you're okay with the lip sync being completely off. And now for the mechanics, or how the core of the game works. Alright, this is where I would have to say I had the roughest time. I mean, getting through the first hour of Lost Judgement felt more like reading a legal document rather than playing a game. Thanks to its many introductions of characters and having to give me written instructions on what to do next every few minutes. This isn't really a unique problem to Lost Judgement or Yakuza. Japanese games tend to give a lot of text prompts to make sure you understand what you're supposed to do or how you're supposed to play a game. But when the game is action-based, these many interruptions really get in the way of enjoying the game. However, when you finally get through it, it's generally smooth sailing from there, so hopefully you can hang on. When it comes to combat, you're given 3 fighting styles to switch between. Tiger is meant to dish out heavy damage, Crane is meant to be evasive while attacking several opponents at the same time, and the new Snake style is specialized for parrying strikes and fending off armed opponents. Each of these styles can actually handle any situation anyway, so don't worry about mastering how to use each one of them. Fighting in general is actually pretty fun. There's so many situations you can make at any point, and it works seamlessly with wandering around the open world. I hardly ever got tired of fighting mobs, even if there was a lack of enemy variety, and this is mostly because combat is super fluid and I can do all sorts of flashy stuff so long as I've got an EX charge. Getting through combat and finishing quests will reward you with SP, which you mainly use to buy the many upgrades available to you. Word of advice, you're going to want to get a lot of health upgrades because some enemies, particularly the boss types, can dish out an unreasonable amount of damage and you'll want to be able to survive that. Improving other things can be done as well, like the ability to get bonuses for eating, making tailing missions easier, or getting better stamina for your grip. You'll want to take some of these upgrades, as you'll be facing some required sequences of climbing to areas or stealth sections. And given how clunky they are, that extra bit of convenience is just going to be that much more helpful. I wish there were better improvements for the sneaking parts of this game. There are points that straight up do not make sense. Even if I perfectly sneak up on an enemy, I can't do a stealth takedown because I didn't throw a coin to keep them preoccupied. That is the logic here. These coin throws can only be done at specific points of the map if you're standing at a specific point in the map, and you really have to look for both. Chase sequences are a bit more fun since they are taking a more active part of the gameplay and are short enough so they don't overstay their welcome. It's essentially just a set of PTEs until your target runs out of stamina, but at least they mix things up to keep me invested. There's parkour sections in the game too, and it's not much to write about. You'll get through it. You'll be fine. Oh, and for some reason you have a skateboard. You go faster than your usual running speed, but can only use it in certain areas like roads. You must also look out for running into people, and there's the bonus of being a middle-aged man wearing a leather jacket riding a skateboard in a city. Honestly though, I think it's useful for getting away from fights that you don't want to take, but that's about it. It really looks like the point of this is to have multiple types of activities you can interact with in the world, where the pace varies depending on what you're doing, from the quick and chaotic combat to the slow and calculated stealth sections. While I think they miss more than hit on this part of the review, they did a similar approach on how they made the content, and the story for that part is quite a bit different. And now for the content, or what you play through in the game. Despite my criticisms in terms of graphics and mechanics, I honestly think it makes up for more than that in the amount of content Lost Judgement is doling out for anyone who's able to get through the rougher introduction of this game. It was said back then that they were looking to make something like a TV drama back in the first game, and that approach hasn't really changed. With that in mind, you'll have to tackle the content, at least for the main story, as you would a TV show. A few hours into the game and you'll be presented with this question. How is a bullying problem at a high school, a groping incident in a train many kilometers away, and a 2-month-old rotting corpse linked? Finding that out will be your long-term objective in Lost Judgement. As you progress through the chapters of the main story, you even get recaps of what previously transpired. A decent part of the lines involve making sure that the audience is following along and not forgetting any key details. This hand-holding approach may make or break the experience for you, but it's only one facet of what the game has to offer. I also would like to point out that I skipped every single recap because you can do that. Yagami is introduced to a high school to deal with a bullying case, and the first thing he does is beat up a bunch of bullies, which may have missed the message, but hey, that could be a selling point for some people. Anyway, not too long after that, you unlock something called School Stories, a set of self-contained interwoven subquests where you're tasked to investigate a mysterious entity who's getting the students of Seiryu High School tangled with unsavory acts and actors. It has its own progression system as well, which will quickly remind you of a Persona game. The stories are a bit cheesy, but manage to throw in some surprises here and there. I do think the themes fit since you're dealing with high school students, and the problems they deal with and how they develop makes sense to me. The neat part is each of them unlocks yet another mini-game as part of your infiltration of their organization. It can involve piloting robots, doing a dance, doing skateboard tricks, boxing, and so much more. Some of them are long, some of them are really short, but all of them pretty fun. And some people are like, don't got time for that. Want something more of a one-shot 20-minute or so adventure? Well, Lost Judgement's got you covered. You can take on requests posted to the detective agency, which are pretty much one-shot stories that have a much more lighthearted tone to them. Or just progress one step of a quest chain through a search engine. Heck, maybe just walk a dog and find a new mystery. Yep, you can do that too. What gets me invested in playing these quests that generally have similar mechanics and sequences to them, where you go from point A to point B and find something or fight someone, is how each story is full of characters that feel grounded, nuanced, and, well, real people. Even a simple story about finding someone's correct time capsule became something about letting go of a past that you've held on to. Chasing something in the sky became a story of a guy accepting the reality of the situation. It made me want to see a lot of stories to the end, because despite their short-lived time in the spotlight, I tend to like the people involved. Now, perhaps you just want to explore the city and the many activities it has to offer, aside from getting plastered, that is. There's a ton of mini games you can play, and actual old Sega games if you're willing to walk into an arcade for one. The fact that you can play an old version of Virtua Fighter in the school is pretty amazing on its own. Heck, there's a Sonic fighting game there, and I just had to play that. There's even this VR board game that you can play, which makes you a lot of money real fast. It's quite similar to Mario Party, and again, I can't believe how they managed to make something like that and just add it onto the game. A lot of these can stand alone as games of their own, especially the school stories bit. It's just so overwhelming how you can get lost in the many activities this game has to offer. The sheer variety of content in Lost Judgement kept me wanting to check out what the new marker on the map is about. They even vary in tone of light and heavy stories, so it was hard to get tired of playing at all, since all you really had to do to change things up was decide that you wanted to do something different. The hours pretty much just ticked away thanks to the abundant offerings Lost Judgement had in store for me. Now for the features or the other things you get to enjoy aside from the main game. In this case, I think RGG Studios did okay. There are definitely things they could have done better, like the map. I mean, you have several ways of viewing the map, which helps in keeping your view from getting too cluttered. I just wish they had integrated fast travel a little bit better so I didn't have to jump between menus so often just to get things done. I'd have to say the same for inventory management, equipment aside. I don't think queuing up one healing item for you to use is good enough, especially for the battles late into the game. It might have been better for them to have a quick menu for the healing items. They also have a case file, which I think is more for helping somebody who hasn't played in a while to be all caught up with what's been happening in the game so far. So you won't really need it unless you stop playing Lost Judgement for an extended period of time for whatever reason. Then there's the Gauntlet mode that lets you take on challenges that you gradually unlock as you play the main game. You can also do 2-player versus with the fighting games you find in Lost Judgement. On top of that, there is a replay theater for the big scenes within the main story for you to view, which I primarily used to compare voiceovers with. And finally, it has an NG Plus mode, which gives you a fresh new save with upgrades and items carried over. Now, I couldn't imagine why you do that when Premium Adventure mode is in essence what you really want as a post-game experience. Now for the conclusion or my bottom line with the game. Lost Judgement came down like a hard drink, where the initial sips could be a challenge to take, but the buzz you get for downing a few shots could be well worth it. I'd pick up the game every now and then while writing just to check on a few details, only to find that I have somehow been robbed of yet another set of hours of my time. It's just really that entertaining. I ended up wanting to see how every story would conclude itself as they crafted even the most minor characters to give me something to care about, and that's pretty much a trick here. It's not some new technology that procedurally creates new encounters or a graphics engine that blows our collective minds. It's just this thorough weaving of stories with whatever little games that the developers can mix it with. They made something compelling, entertaining, and can be taken at a pace of our choosing. Truly, it's a shame that this may be the last Judgement title to come to us, ironically because of the legal situation around it. Also, considering that RGG Studio has gone through a restructuring, this may be the last game of its kind. Lost Judgement has a lot of heart, wanting to share the highs and lows it has in store with the world, and I recommend that you listen to the story, because there's a lot to learn. Lost Judgement certainly found its stride, scoring a 4 out of 5. Available on the PlayStations and the Xboxes. Thank you for watching our video. If you like this kind of content, we've got more coming. If you want to see other content, there's more on this YouTube channel, and there's also our site Raymaru Files. Be sure to follow us on the usual social media, that's Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Alright, bye then, until next time.